fulfills the very name, which is one of those letters and words in the Old Testament, every jot and tittle fulfilled in Jesus. So Matthew 2:15, out of Egypt have I called my son. Old Testament Israel was a type. Matthew 2:15 is quoting Hosea 11:1, Jesus the reality. John 15, Jesus says, I'm the true vine. Well, Isaiah 5 said Israel was the, if you will, old vine, the type and the shadow. Jesus is the reality. The feast days, you go right down the list, the Sabbath, what have you. Jesus, the Lamb, right? The Passover. Jesus becomes all of these things. And that's just too simple for today's doctrine of the day. Because I tell you, they've started a heavy metal group to get their message out called Twisted Scripture. Because it is so clear, if we have not had this other stuff pumped into us, pounded into us, said, said so long and so loud to the church. So, bit of a word of correction, but God never does that, right? So again, you're listening to Bible Prophecy Fulfilled. You can find out more when our website's back up, BibleProphecyFulfilled.org. And we're on KKLA 99.5 being assisted by Skype. Our sponsors are CashForLoansNow.com. Dr. Phil Anderson, you want to talk to there? And his number is 866-559-3214, CashForLoansNow.com. He can get you out from under carrying someone on your mortgage to give you that cash that you would need now that's going to be devalued within 30 years. When you get it paid off, you don't have to be a bank and collect from people. So call Phil, cashforloansnow.com, 866-559-3214. So we are discussing Israel in prophecy, and we're seeing that the Old Covenant Israel was a type and a shadow, and that, in fact, Romans chapter 9, I just read, that people of the physical seed are not the children of promise, but those of faith. In fact, Romans 4, you'll want to read that whole chapter about Abraham's faith. But Romans chapter 9, verse 27 also helps us out, and it says, a remnant shall be saved, because we're talking about all Israel being saved here in Romans chapter 11, verse 25 and 26. Again, the English Standard Version says, and so, King James says, and so. English Standard Version says, in this way, all Israel be saved. That is, in what way? In the gospel going out to reach the fullness of the Gentiles. And we've gone over that. Colossians 1, 5, and 6, the gospel which is coming to you as it is in all the world. They turn the world upside down. Acts 17, 6, the oikomene, Roman world. Same word in Luke 2, 1, as since this went throughout the world, not the globe. Roman world is the definition of oikomene. Matthew 24, 14 says this gospel will go into all the world. So again, Colossians 1:23, the gospel which ye have heard, which was preached to every creature which is under heaven. Romans 16, 25, 26, the preaching of Jesus Christ made known to, by the scriptures, made known to all nations for the obedience of faith. It turned that Roman world upside down. And this is the process of all Israel, those who had been scattered, that still hadn't come back into the land, yet they were building, of course, synagogues. Moses was spoken in every city throughout the Roman Empire, right? Acts tells us this. So all of these Jews throughout the empire, a whole complete amount is saved through the simplicity of the gospel, the good news which went out to who? The Jew first, right? So the gospel goes out, people as a result are saved, and it's no more complicated than that, the gospel reaches these people. It wasn't a promised physical utopia over in that land, because Jesus said it, kingdom comes not by observation, Luke 17, 20 through 22. So it's a kingdom that is eternal. The new covenant is everlasting, eternal. The old covenant was coming to an end. And we have to understand that things that are seen are eternal, are temporary, and things that are not seen are eternal. So the Jerusalem which is above is a spiritual kingdom in nature, and the spiritual unseen things are eternal. If it's a physical kingdom in the Middle East, it can't be an eternal one, because according to 2 Corinthians 4:18, the things that are seen are temporal. Things that are unseen are eternal. So, again, what's the dynamics of what was going on is that there was a foolish nation in Deuteronomy 32, and this is a prophecy fitting right into Romans 10:19. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation, that is Israel, would be provoked with this new covenant nation. Now this is Deuteronomy 32, verse 21, and then he says he'll bring up a sword against that nation. Deuteronomy 32:25, verse 29 says, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. Wait a minute, there was an end for them? Yes, there was an end for them. It was the end of the age, the end of the Old Covenant age, the last days of the Old Covenant age. That's the age we're speaking about, Matthew 24:3, the end of the age. Verse 35 of Deuteronomy 32 belongs to them vengeance. Where have we heard that in Bible prophecy? Luke 21:22 speaks of the days of vengeance. So this vengeance is poured out. Deuteronomy 32:41 with the glistening sword. Verse 43 of Deuteronomy 32, rejoice, O nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants and will render vengeance to his adversaries. Remember that blood that was on the hands of those in the first century, Matthew 23:35, all of the righteous blood from the history of the world would be upon them, would be required of them, Luke chapter 11 says. And this is also Revelation 18:24, the blood of the saints and of the prophets was going to be upon them. And that ties somewhat in with this nation is promised, the capital city of this nation is promised with an end. It is the root and the gist of Bible prophecy, where their headquarters, their temple, which meant more to them than life itself, was destroyed, where a remnant would be saved in Israel. All Israel will be saved means a complete whole amount. I don't think hardly any scholars believe that's 100%. In fact, dispensational teachers of our day say it's only 1/3 of Israel is saved, according to their misunderstanding and timing, if you will, of Zechariah 13:8. They'll say only 1/3 is saved, and that's all Israel being saved. Of course, it's not 100%. It's a complete whole amount. It's, as we read in Romans 11 here, it's a remnant, it's an election, a complete whole amount. I don't think many scholars would ever say it's 100%. So a complete whole amount, basically, they were the first fruits, and at the end of the age, at the harvest, when the gospel goes out to all of the Gentiles, fullness of the Gentiles doesn't include 100%, right? Just a complete whole amount. Gospel goes out to them. In the midst of that, all these Jews without the empire, the Jews were intertwined in this Roman Empire. We have no king but Caesar. The Herods were half Jewish, circumcised Jews, yet they were intertwined with this Roman Empire. Again, I mentioned synagogues in every city throughout this empire that was turned upside down with the gospel. A whole complete amount of Israelites were saved through the simplicity here of the gospel. So I think that we have to understand these things when we're looking at Bible prophecy. See that there's no fig tree promised in Matthew 24, that's speaking of the nation of Israel in our day. Matthew 24, verse 32 has the fig tree. Verse 34 tells you when that prophesied event would occur. Verily I say to you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. There can't be a fig tree here in our day, but it had to be in that first century. And the fig tree is simply these things. It's a sign of a season, an approaching season. In fact, that summer is near, in verse 32, is what this fig tree's communicating. And then he says, in the next verse, so likewise when you shall see all these things. It's simply giving an illustration of a tree and a certain season approaching. It was a season of judgment approaching when these things would come to pass. And to just stamp this strange little fire out about the fig tree being Israel, you want to go to Luke 21, interpret Scripture with Scripture and see that in this case, it cannot be clarifying the nation of Israel. I'm just trying to stamp out what I call strange fires in our day concerning these matters. So Luke 21 says in verse 29, and he spake to them a parable, behold, the fig tree and all the trees. So if Jesus was trying to be specific about the fig tree in this case, because the Old Testament uses all kinds of descriptions of Israel. As I mentioned, the vineyard in one place, the olive tree in another place. So we have to get a hold of this fig tree here. If Jesus meant to specifically identify the fig tree, he wouldn't have said, behold the fig tree and all the trees. It's just a certain season would be approaching, and the leaves of the signs of these things, the previous 32 verses with the wars, famines, pestilence, we've gone over that in the first century, recorded by Josephus, and the coming in judgment where the city of Jerusalem was surrounded by armies, Luke 21, 20 through 22. So we want to nail these things down and have a sound mind and have a right heart towards peoples and people groups, even modern-day Israel. What's the solution for modern-day Israel? The simplicity of the gospel. His house is to be a house of prayer for all nations, including the modern state of Israel. Don't say it's not their time. That's another distortion. John Hagee, it's a waste of time to evangelize Jews, the words of John Hagee. The gospel says, now is the time of salvation, whosoever will. So we want to get a hold of God so loved.
You've been listening to Bible Prophecy Fulfilled. Find out more at BibleProphecyFulfilled.com. Listen to radio teachings including the entire book of Revelation, Matthew chapter 24, and the 1,000-year reign, line upon line, verse by verse. All for free at BibleProphecyFulfilled.com. Tune in next Sunday afternoon at 12:30 p.m. for more Bible Prophecy Fulfilled.
And the preceding broadcast sponsored by Bible Prophecy Fulfilled from 99.5 KKLA.